everybody. So, do I have here hundreds of kids who like to read? Yay! So this is one of my absolute favorite days of the year, because what could be better than an auditorium full of 500 kids who love to read, who love to... I always love when the kids buy the books and then are so busy reading they can't even listen to us, but that's great. So you already met Linda Urban, most of you, because Linda she really has missed her calling. My former assistants think you should be a motivational speaker. So I don't know if you all knew it was Linda Urban that was asking you questions. Nope, it was Linda Urban that was asking you questions about the books that you read and the books that you like. So how many people did not know that was Linda Urban? Ah, but you told her the information anyhow. So I want to welcome you to Vermont Technical College, and this is the 57th annual Dorothy Canfield Fisher ceremony. Wow. 57. And no, I have not been to every one of those. Close, but not quite. I'm Grace Green. I'm the Youth Services Consultant for the Vermont Department of Libraries. You don't have to do much to get applause in Vermont, I've always said that. The Department of Libraries and the state PTA co-sponsor this award, and it is our pleasure to host the presentation. And as I said, I'm just so happy to have you all here. I know some of you travel for 2 or maybe 3 hours in a bus. It might not have been that comfortable, but I'm so glad that you were able to come. So another interesting fact, the Dorothy Canfield Fisher Award is the 2nd oldest child-selected award in the country. I'm going to clap for that. Proving once again how cool Vermont is. So each year, a committee of librarians, teachers, and others read several hundred books and then choose a list of 30 of the best in March. And I would like you to recognize with me our very hardworking committee members. I'm going to ask them to stand as I say their names, but please hold off on the applause till we get everybody. So, committee members, when you hear your name, if you recognize it, please stand. Meg Allison, who is responsible for everything, I hear. Lauren Chabot, Lauren couldn't make it. Caitlin Corliss, she's the little one over there. Suzanne Loring, who couldn't make it. Hannah Peacock, Julie Pickett, and Chair Mary Linney. I saw that some of you had read all 30 books on the DCF list. Well, all of those committee members read those 30 and probably about 200 more. So that's what it means to be on the DCF committee. So Suzanne Loring and Mary Linney, who has been our chair for several years, are going off the committee, and we would like to thank them for all their work. Well. New committee members are Jane Knight and Lisa Buckton. Lisa, stand up. Where are you? There you are. Who are well into their reading for this year, I hope. So I think you all know how this works, but I'll just go over it. Each year, thousands of kids in grades 4 to 8 read the books and then vote on their favorite. This year, as you know, DCF readers chose Wonder by R.J. Palacio. Ms. Palacio was not able to join us today, but we do have her award created by the official DCF artist, Diana Dunn from Jericho. And Diana is going to talk to you in a few minutes about the award. She's going to show it to you and talk to you about how she created it. I want to acknowledge Amy Noyes, who is somewhere. Amy Noyes, who works for Vermont Public Radio. Now, how many of you had the chance to listen to Dorothy's List on VPR? Not so many. Well, okay, so what's wrong with you teachers and librarians? Oh, I'm not supposed to say that. Dorothy's List is this fabulous new radio program that Amy thought up and produces that talks about the DCF books. And each month, she interviews a group of kids at a school or public library and has them ask questions of the author. And sometimes the author is there, and sometimes the author is interviewed separately. The series is finished for this year, but she told me recently that she has funding for next year. So starting in September, will it be the same time? The first Monday of every month at noon during Vermont edition will be Dorothy's List, a segment on the DCF Award. What? It's rebroadcast at 7 p.m. and it is recorded, so you can actually go anytime to the website. So it'd be fun to listen to it as a group, but you can also listen to it in your homes or wherever you happen to be. So this year we have 2 books on the new DCF list written by Vermont authors. Vermont is blessed to have many fabulous creators of children's books, and these 2 people are 2 of the best. Today is a celebration of both the DCF program in general and of Vermont authors in particular. We are very lucky to have with us today both of these people, and in a few minutes each of them will give a talk about her book on the new list, thus whetting your appetite for the reading to come. We have both of these books for sale, plus some of their previous titles. I know many of you have already discovered this, and both authors have kindly autographed book plates, so if you buy a book, you will get a signed book plate. And some of you have been to this before, but not all of you, so I'll mention at the very end, after the authors have spoken, there is a chance for every one of you to meet them individually. So we do like a receiving line, and it is a long line. You have to be patient, but you will have a chance to shake their hands and talk to them, and for those who want to have their picture taken, that's the time to do that. I hope all your students saw that there were bookmarks with the new books on them. How many of you have already read a book or 2 from the new list? All right, okay, maybe you'll be back here next year. If schools want a bunch of bookmarks, we have some printed up, but they're also available to be downloaded from our website. And in addition, this is for the librarians and the teachers, we have spine labels and winter stickers which you can request from my office. So I'm going to call Diana up to the podium now. This is Diana Dunn, who has been our official DCF artist for several years and has done all of the awards for the winning author.
Yeah, I'll just take a few minutes. I wanted to explain the award. Before you see it, though, each year this is my 6th year of doing this, and each year I get challenged by Grace to come up with one illustration that captures the essence of the book. So just before I show it to you, I wanted you to take a second and think about wonder, and how would you illustrate it? What's the one illustration you would do? As I was reading the book, I tag lots and lots of pages. I think as I read it, I go through it 4 or 5 times, and I try to think about the one illustration. And I remembered at the end of the book there was a very powerful scene where he receives this award, and it's the Henry Beecher Award. And I wanted to illustrate that, but then I realized that I would leave out so many other things if that's the only thing I illustrated. And I also identified with his mother. She was an illustrator, and she also took lots of pictures. So I figured it was his first year at school, at 5th grade at a preparatory school. And if I were his mother, I would put together a scrapbook. And so you'll be able to see this later, closer, so you can, up at the end of their ceremony, I'll stay if there's any questions, and also you can look at it in more detail. But this is an open scrapbook where it has photos that she took along the year. It also allowed me to illustrate Augie, and I wanted to be very sensitive to how I illustrated Augie because the author was obviously very sensitive about it in the story. So I illustrated him at the Egypt Museum in his mummy costume. I also showed him with Daisy wearing his favorite baseball cap when he still had his long hair. I loved Babu, and he didn't need Babu to go to camp with him, and so I have Babu with a little note pinned or taped to Babu to his mother. I also have the science experiment that he did with Jack. Oh no, by the way, he's with Summer in the Egypt Museum. That was one of his first good friends. And then I figured the principal would have left him with a certificate. He handed him a gold medal around his neck, but he also, I know that he would have given him, Mr. Tushman would have given him a certificate. So I added a certificate here And I know the author was very proud of the words that she'd written to capture Augie's power and strength, so that way I could include it on the certificate. He is the greatest whose strength carries up the most hearts. I also have a picture with some friends here where he's holding his gold medal up in front of his face, his duck from his self-portrait, the ticket from Our Town, the play that his sister was in, and finally I have a piece of paper actually cut out that he wrote his precept on, and I have that glued into his scrapbook. Everyone in the world should get a standing ovation at least once in their life, because we all overcometh the world. So I welcome you to look at this at the end of this ceremony. Up close, we'll leave it here in the front, and I'll be by if you have any questions on how I created it, or if you can share ideas with how you would have illustrated it. I would very much like to hear those ideas. Thank you.
So I am Linda Urban. My book is called The Center of Everything. I was lucky enough to have one other book on the DCF list a few years ago called A Crooked Kind of Perfect. And I have to tell you that being on the DCF list is an author's dream come true. Now you guys, some of you raised your hands and told me about books that, it's not working, Grace. Some of you raised your hands and told me about books that you would not have read otherwise. We know that's true as authors. We know that sometimes a cover appeals to you and sometimes it doesn't. We know sometimes you think of a book as a boy book, and because you're a girl, you won't read it. Now, I don't believe in boy books or girl books, but I do know that that happens sometimes. But when your book is on the DCF list, that means kids all over the state are at least going to give it a look. Some of them are going to give it a try, and some of them are going to love it and find themselves in those pages. That's a marvelous thing, and I thank the committee for putting my book on this list this year. Thank you all so much. I go to schools a lot, and when I go to schools, I often do writers' workshops, where we write in our author's notebooks or our writer's notebooks. How many of you have a writer's notebook? Either one that you had to keep in class or one that was your own. This is not going to work. Raise your hand again. How many of you have a writer's notebook that you use either on your own or in class? I have writer's notebooks too. This one is my current one, and mostly it has lists in it, observations. When I go to the doctor's office and I'm totally bored, I start writing all the things that annoy me about the doctor's office. I write what it smells like, I write what it sounds like, I write down pieces of conversation from people that are bugging me. I also have notes for speeches like this one right here in this current book. One time in 2009, I was carrying this notebook when I was teaching a writer's workshop at Reed College in Portland, Oregon. I asked my students to do a free write. I was going to give them a beginning of a sentence, and they were going to keep writing and see what happened. The prompt that I used was one I actually wrote down in a notebook years earlier. How many of you read See You at Harry's? I went to a class taught by that author, Jo Knowles. She had her students use this very same prompt, and I stole it. She said it was okay. And I had the students write, I have my page marked, starting with this line: what I should have said was. What I should have said was. And the students in Joe's class wrote amazing things, and I knew it would work in my class too, but like all good teachers, if I wanted my students to do something, I had to do it too. So I did the prompt. What I should have said was, and I started writing. I had no idea what I was going to write. But once I started, it was clear. What I should have said was yes. I went back to a memory, a real-life memory, of the summer where I turned 17. That summer, my father died. He had cancer. he was on a lot of medication, and he woke up one day, and he started to tell me something. And what he was trying to say was hard for me to understand. He was on a lot of pain medicine. He wasn't speaking that clearly, but what he was saying was scaring me so much, and I said, no, hello. You're ruining my poignant story, Grace. I'll try it again.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. So he wanted to,
It only works for me.
yes. So he wanted to tell me something, but what he wanted to say was so scary to me. And that moment was so scary. I said, no, Dad, don't. No, it's just the medicine, no. Years later, when I wrote this prompt, and I wanted to say yes, because that turned out to be the day my father died. That was our last conversation. And I felt bad about it ever since. Now, I forgave myself. I was only 17. But I still had regrets. And I wrote about those in 2009 in a very terrible poem, right here. The poem was totally stinky, but the emotion was real. And that alone made it valuable. What we write in our writer's notebooks does not have to be beautiful. It doesn't have to have every perfect word. But if we're honest about what we put in it, amazing things can happen. Here's another writer's notebook. This one has a skull drawn by my son. This one is from July 2010. And I was standing at the Montpelier 4th of July parade. I love this parade. How many of you have parades in your town or nearby towns? Yeah. I love the Montpelier 4th of July parade because it has important, dignified figures, like the governor of the state. And it also has groups of kindergarteners, walking their dogs, right? I love how it represents our town. So I was standing there, waiting for the parade to start, and somewhere in my mind, I got the image of a girl who was also waiting. And I could just, in my imagination, see the back of her head, and I knew she had sweaty little curls, and I knew that she was waiting for something different than what we all were waiting for. We were all waiting for the parade to start, but in my mind, that girl was waiting for something specific. She was waiting, I thought, maybe for a float to come by around the corner and down the street, and when it got to her, something was going to happen. I didn't know what, but I knew, what if she had to make a choice? What if there was something she had to do? And what if she believed that whatever it was, whatever she chose, that choice would change her life? I went home and I wrote that in this notebook. And the next few days, I wrote other things. I wrote about the town. I made a long list of things you could find in parades. I had a setting, but I didn't have the emotion yet. So I just kept writing in all kinds of writers' notebooks about the setting, about the character, about the scene, and then one day, these two notebooks came together. I knew what she was waiting for. She believed that when she got on that float and she made her choice, that somehow she would be able to fix the thing she most regretted, and her wish would come true. Then I just had to write it. And I did, sometimes in a writer's notebook, eventually on a computer, and that story became the center of everything. Did I know when I was scribbling in my writer's notebook that it would be a book, that it would be published? No. Did I have any dream that the DCF committee would choose it to be on their list? Not at all. When you write in your writer's notebooks, you need to be fearless. And you don't need to worry that it's going to be something big. Sometimes the something little makes a difference. Now, I'm going to take a sip of water, and then I'm going to read one little chapter from this book. Does that sound good? All right. I would love it if this microphone was working now. Oh, it's like magic. It worked. What you need to know in this book, I've already told you about this character. The girl I imagined, her name is Ruby Pepperdine. Ruby is waiting on the parade route. She has written an essay that has won a contest. And she is this year's essay girl in her small New Hampshire town called Bunning. Bunning is named for a sea captain, Captain Cornelius Bunning, who not only founded the town, but he invented the hole in the donut. That is why he is famous. So Ruby is essay girl. Someone has taped a square on the sidewalk where she's supposed to stand, and someone else thought that square didn't seem right, so they made a big circle in the middle of it, like a donut, and that's where Ruby is standing. She knows her wish is going to come true. And this chapter tells you why she believes that's so. It's called The Statue. If you are ever selected Bunning Day Essay Girl, or boy for that matter, you stand in the circle, in the square, on Cornelius Circle, across from Bunning Memorial Park. There is a statue in that park. You can see it clearly. Cornelius Bunning, dressed in his captain's coat, one hand fixed to the wheel of his ship, Evangeline, the other hand holding aloft a donut, perfectly round against the sky. People come with folding chairs and blankets and ice chests to claim spots around you. Some pass through your sight line, but you can still keep an eye on the captain if you want. You can watch birds land on the wheel spokes and on the cap he wears tight on his curly bronze head. Squirrels climb up too, holding hunks of donut in their teeth. If you were closer, you could see the squirrels nibbling. If you were closer than that, you could see the details of Captain Bunning's coat, the pipe sticking out of his pocket, the carvings on his buttons, and you might even notice tiny flecks on the donut that he holds. Sprinkles, it might look like to you. Of course, if you were the essay girl, or boy, or any kid in Bunning, you would know that those sprinkles were really failed wishes. You would know that each fleck was made by a quarter. Not just any quarter, but a 2001 quarter, or a 2004 quarter, or even a 1966 quarter if you were really old. A quarter from the year you were born. A quarter you had put in your pocket and carried to Bunning Circle on your birthday. A quarter you had held in that pocket until your hand was wet with sweat, until you had whispered your wish, your greatest wish, 90 times. A quarter you had held between your fingers while you squinted hard at that donut and held your breath and aimed and pitched, straight like a dart or arced like a softball or spun like a skipping stone. If the quarter went through the hole in Captain Bunning's bronze donut, your wish would come true. Everybody knows that. It is hard to whiz a quarter through a 3-inch hole of a bronze donut suspended 16 feet off the ground. Even those with the best aim usually ting their quarter against the donut edge or Captain Bunning's cold metal fingers. And you only get one chance each birthday. You can't stand there flinging quarter after quarter. One quarter, one chance. Everybody knows that, too. But if you did it, through luck or skill or whatever, if you did it, your wish would come true before the next Bunning Day was over. That, Ruby knows, is why she is standing in the circle, in the square, on Cornelius Circle. Because on her birthday, her 12th birthday, her quarter had gone through. What's that? You need to do this? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for listening. I hope that when you read this book, you think about your own wishes and your own dreams and what, if you were Ruby Pepperdine, you would most wish for. And now, let's welcome Tanya Lee Stone on up to the podium.
So the first thing I want to do is congratulate all of you guys for all the books that you've read and the fact that you're here to listen to people talk about books and that you love to read all of these books. So please give yourselves a round of applause. I'd also like to add my thanks to the committee, and there it goes again, right? This is going to be tricky. Yeah, oh yes. And now it's back on? Now it's back on. It's like a microphone. I was going to say fairy, but it's probably the evil twin of a microphone fairy. Okay. I would also like to extend my thanks to the DCF committee for choosing Courage Has No Color for next year's list. That is an incredible thing. And like Linda said, we don't dream about things like that when we're writing. We're just writing. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that with you guys. So my name is Tanya Lee Stone, and I write a lot of different kinds of books. I write picture books for when you were a little bit younger. You may have read some of them. And I write these older nonfiction books, and even later some teen fiction for when you're in high school. But the bulk of what I choose to write about are true nonfiction books, true stories. I really love finding missing pieces of history. History that's not necessarily in your social studies textbooks. Or maybe there's one sentence about someone, like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and then poof, she's out of that history book as fast as she came in. Because there are all of these holes in our history books. And those holes generally have to do with women and people of color. We've been very good at capturing the history of the white male population, and that's a great thing. But it's also time to kind of fill in a lot of the holes that are there. And I come across these stories and I just find them fascinating. And that's what history is. History is cool people doing interesting things. That's it. That's what history is. Now, if someone had told me that when I was your age, I would have been really grateful. And I probably would have gone outside of the dry history books that weren't making things come alive a little bit more than I did. But what I did find when I was your age were these childhood of famous American books. And I loved them. I ate them up. These were biographies, and I'm using air quotes for a reason, which I'll tell you about in a second. They were biographies, and at that time they were shelved in nonfiction. And I devoured them because they read like novels. So they were really interesting to me, and they used all of the kinds of things that novels use. They used dialogue and setting and character development and plot twists. But they were these great true stories about people who actually lived and did these great things. Until I grew up and I found out that a lot of those books were fictionalized, and they actually say that on the back of them now. So they're shelved in fiction now. And I felt really kind of robbed. Like, wait a minute, now I don't even know how many details are in my brain that I thought were true that aren't. And I still don't know. And I don't know until I come across my own research and I correct something that I thought was true. So, sort of unbeknownst to me, my mission became finding out how to write really true stories where I don't make anything up, but I write them in the same way that I would write fiction. So that's what I do, and that's what Courage Has No Color is. It's a true story about the first black paratroopers in World War II, one of whom, Walter Morris, who was 92 the day after this book came out. He turned 92, and we got to hoop and holler at his birthday party about finally having his story told. Walter Morris stood up and asked himself the question that every person asks that changes their life, and every writer asks that leads them to a story. And that question is the most powerful two words that you have in your arsenal right now. What if? And Linda said those two words. And that's not surprising, because writers know that what if is the secret power. And now you all know that what if is the secret power. So Walter Morris looked around his troop. He was stationed down in Fort Benning, Georgia, with a group of other black African-American soldiers in World War II. And they were pulling guard duty for the paratrooping school, because that's what a lot of black soldiers did in World War II. They were part of the Air Force and the Army and the Navy, but they were often relegated to labor duties, which meant working in the kitchens, driving the trucks, doing laundry, being guards, and things like that. And they really wanted to be combat soldiers alongside their white counterparts. So Walter Morris looked around at his men. He was in charge of them. He was a first sergeant, and he said, what if? What if I found a way to help our guys mimic what the white paratrooper students are doing and show them, prove to them that they are equally able to be paratroopers as the white students who are allowed to be being trained. And he started to do that, sort of secretly, but you know, it was a field, so some people saw, right? But he didn't ask permission. He just had this idea of what if, because his goal was to raise the morale of his troops. Well, one day, he got called to the general's office. That was pretty scary, right? You get called to the general's office, you know you've been doing something kind of behind the scenes that you don't have permission to do. And he was nervous, and he rode his bicycle to the general's office. And the general called him in, and he really thought he was going to get chewed out for this. And the general said, "So I see your guys on the field going through the paratrooper activities, jumping out of mock airplanes and doing calisthenics and all of these things that our students, our white students, are doing. What's the deal?" And Walter proceeded to tell him, very timidly. And as he sort of noticed that the general wasn't yelling at him, he got up a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more courage as he started to unfold this story. And it turned out to be a very good thing. And I'm not going to spoil it all for you, but I will read a chapter. But it ended up being a very good thing, and they got to do some things that were that had never ever happened before in the U.S. Army. So I'm going to tell you a tiny little bit about what I talk about when I go to schools. We talk about writer's notebooks all the time, and Linda already covered that perfectly. She hit on the word perfect, and that's something I want to talk to you about too, and also the word good. If I were to visit your school and have loads of time, you know, an hour to talk with a group of you, I would go into a lot of detail about this, but we only have a few minutes, so I want you to take some takeaways away from you. Yeah. I'm a writer, can you tell? So it doesn't have to be perfect. My first words out of my mouth don't have to be perfect, just like they weren't just now, because later I can go and fix them. But what is important is the idea that you take and the idea that you get down on your paper. So, one of the things I learned from being a nonfiction writer is that research is an adventure. I used to think that research was only done in libraries, and now I know that research means things like getting into the cockpit of a fighter jet and seeing what that looks like, or climbing into a tank full of harbor seals with a veterinarian and helping them get an exam. And now I know what that kind of looks like. And that is research. So when I read to you this opening scene, I want you to think about the fact that every single word that I'm going to read to you that I hope will sound like a novel might, as engaging as a novel might, is based in research. So I want you to think about that a little bit when I'm writing. Now there's this other thing that has mostly to do with perfect and good, and some of us call it writer's block. So writer's block is, I think, a figment of our imaginations. And there's a very easy way to get rid of it, and it's about not worrying about being good or perfect. Just get those words out of your head. Not worrying about being good or perfect is what makes you be able to write. And the whole reason that we write is to express ourselves, to get what's in our heads and in our hearts down onto the paper, right? So the next time you are going to write something, don't stop yourself at the first sentence or the second sentence or the first paragraph and ask yourself or your teacher or your friend if it's good. Don't do it. Don't do that to yourself. You're getting in your own way if you do that. Just keep going. Just keep going. And then when you have a draft of a story, you can worry about revision and fixing things. But revision is a whole other topic. But the whole point of drafting a story is to just figure out what you think, where the what-ifs are going to take you, not whether it's good or perfect. The other is to choose something that you are really passionate about writing. So I'm sure you've all been in a situation where your teacher's going to do a unit on something. Say it's scientists or inventors or countries, it doesn't matter. And maybe there's a list of topics. Don't close your eyes and point. Don't do that to yourself. Look at the list of topics. Go to the library and flip through the covers even. It might even just be a cover. You might only need 15 minutes in the library of looking through the list of scientists or inventors or countries to see what speaks to you, the writer. You. That's what matters. It matters that you, the writer, are writing about something that you care about, something that you want to spend time learning about, something that you're excited to share. And that thing that you're excited about or agitated about or piqued by doesn't have to be positive. It could be something that really gets your dander up. It could be something that makes you irritated or outraged or mad. I certainly write about things like that in my books, things that are unjust. So you don't always even have to look for stuff that you love. It could be something that you want to understand better. But it doesn't matter what it is, it matters that you, the writer, are captured by it enough to be able to spend the time to learn about it and express yourself. So those are the things that I want you to take with you. That it's what's in your head and in your heart that you want to get on the page. Don't worry whether it's good or perfect, but be interested in whatever it is that you're writing, and then your writing will be interesting. And you guys already have the first step to being good writers in this room because you're all good readers. And reading as much as you can is the basis of being a literary person, a literate person forever. Books, anytime you meet somebody in your life that's a book person, that's a reader, everyone in this room is probably going to say, oh, that's someone I might be friends with. So that's what I want to tell you about that. Okay, I'm going to read you the opening chapter of Courage Has No Color. And again, I want you to think about now that you're hearing it, and I've told you a little bit about what research means and about how writing a true story means that I can use any fiction technique I want, just like Linda does. I can use dialogue, but I have to know that it's a quote from somebody. I can use setting, but I have to have been there or seen it in a photograph or a video or in person to know that it's true. So every single thing you're going to hear in this opening scene is based in research, and you can trust every word of it. Okay, chapter 1. What is it like to jump out of an airplane? Imagine. You are a paratrooper suiting up for a jump. Guys on either side of you are doing the same. One jokes about having a dream that the chutes didn't open. Another one says he's glad they paid their insurance. You stand strong even though you are loaded down with 100 pounds of equipment strapped to your body. Main chute, reserve chute, and combat gear. The jump master walks down the line, inspecting each of you, making sure you are properly fitted. Your life depends on it. The joking stops. The jump master commands, load. In jump order, your line of troopers, your stick, climbs into the plane. You follow the trooper in front of you to your spot and sit. Now you are in the air, on your way to the drop zone. You're chatting with your buddies above the noise of the plane. Puke buckets are always on board, but you don't need one today. 20 minutes from the drop zone, it's time to get serious. The red warning light near the door turns on. The jump master stands and shouts, "Get ready!" He walks down the line, alerting each jumper with a word in the ear and a touch on the shoulder, making sure each and every man hears him. You shuffle forward, sticking close to the man in front of you. The man in back of you does the same. You watch as the troopers in front of you follow each command, quickly disappearing one by one out the open door of the plane. And now, it's your turn. Stand in the door! Nothing separates you from the sky but one last sliver of floor. The tip of your left boot hangs slightly over the edge. The wind whips. The white is blinding, bright. Adrenaline pulses through you. You look down at a brown and green patchwork quilt of open fields and thickets of trees. The roar of the engine pulses with the pounding of your heart. You are over the drop zone. It's time. The jump master bellows, "Go!" You jump. You force yourself to focus. Count. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Your hand is on the reserve chute, ready if you need it. Thwap. Your main chute opens and the line snaps tight. You are floating down, down, down. The rumble of the plane and the jump master's shouts are gone. Your ears fill with a hush like any other. Extreme quiet. Looking down, feet together, you see the ground through the tiny V space where the toes of your boots almost touch. Looking up, you see the reassuring inside of your open chute. Looking out, You see the other jumpers' chutes falling with yours, like jellyfish swimming through a sea of sky. The ground gets closer, rushing towards you as if wanting to swallow you whole. For an instant, your billowy chute seems like it might cradle you on impact. Then you hit the ground, hard, thud. Even a perfect landing sends shockwaves rolling up through the soles of your feet, all the way to your jaw, clapping it shut. What did it take to be a paratrooper in World War II? Specialized training, extreme physical fitness, courage, and until the 555th Parachute Infantry Battalion, the Triple Nickels, was formed, white skin. It is 1943. Americans are overseas fighting World War II to help keep the world safe from Adolf Hitler's tyranny, safe from injustice, safe from discrimination. Yet right here at home, people with white skin have rights that people with black skin do not. What is courage? What is strength? Perhaps it is being ready to fight for your nation, even when your nation isn't ready to fight for you. Thank you so much. Thank you again to the DCF committee, and thank you to all of you readers and teachers and librarians who embrace books and reading and are here with us to celebrate. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. That was wonderful. I was very nervous for the guy jumping out of the plane, I have to say. I was getting very upset, but presumably he lived or you wouldn't have. Yeah. Okay. So, if you have questions for either of these wonderful people, please raise your hand and we will call on you.
Okay. Yes, right here in the third row of white.
You have a question for me. I'm going to come to you with the microphone. You can stand up and say it right into the microphone, my friend.
We hope it works.
How do you come up with the ideas? How do you come up with ideas for stories? Ideas for stories can be anywhere. So I showed you one already in this example, right? An idea could come from something that happened in your life. An idea could come from a what if. I have a friend, her name is Kate Messner. Have any of you read any of Kate's books? Kate makes lists of things that are interesting to her, like the Everglades, and concussions, and kids who speak when they shouldn't. And then she tries to put those three things together in a story. Ideas are everywhere, and that's why I carry my writer's notebook, is because whenever anything is interesting to me, I write it down. I bet Tanya has a good answer to this too, so I'm going to hand her the mic.
I would just add to that that whenever you do think of something, you write it down. Even if you don't have your writer's notebook with you, write it down on a little scrap of paper. Because, you know, our memories might be not as good as theirs, but we all experience thinking of something during the day and then trying to remember it at night and it's gone. So just write it down as soon as you think of it.
I had a friend, Tony Johnson, who is a poet, and every time I saw her, her hands were covered with words. Because she never had a pen, but she always wrote stuff down. She's covered it in.
How long does it usually take to write a book?
There's a loaded question, right? So I'm going to let us both answer that question because I'm sure it's different. And actually, for me, it's different with every single book. Every single one. And that depends, for me, for nonfiction books, about how hard it is to find the story. So Courage Has No Color actually took me 10 years because that story had never, ever been told before. So it took all this detective work and tracking down pieces of the story from here and there and everywhere, including all the photographs that are in the book, 10 years. But The Good, the Bad, and the Barbie took me 1 year because there's a lot of information about what we feel about and think about in the book.
Yeah. I have a picture book. The only thing that's ever happened that way that took only about 3 days, including revision. It happened once for me. It will probably never happen again.
I'm very jealous.
Yes. Most of my books, though, take anywhere from a year to, let's see, the book I'm working on right now is taking about 7 so far.
And let's add to that that doesn't mean that we're sitting in our chairs 8 hours a day for 7 years. It doesn't mean that. We're working on other things, we're moms, we're writing other books, but from start to finish, from the time that you have the idea until the time that it's I'm going to use the G word, good enough, published.
Yeah.
It could take 7 years.
Yeah.
Oh boy, this is going to be hard. Okay, let's go to this side of the room. Right here in the purple.
What made you want to write your books?
Sure. Can I change your question just a little bit? Because I kind of told you already about what made me want to write this book. But what made me want to be a writer is that when I was a little kid, writing was the thing I was good at. And it was the thing that when I did it, it was like the whole rest of the world disappeared. It was like my heart beat at a different pace than the rest of the world. I didn't hear other people, I didn't see other people, and that felt great. Plus, I got smiley faces on my papers. So those two things made me feel like a writer. And I'll tell you another secret. I won't take up too much time. But by the time I was in 7th grade, I shared something that mattered to me and someone made fun of it. And it mattered so much to me, and I was so scared by that experience that I stopped writing entirely. And it wasn't until I was a grown-up and I had a baby and I was reading picture books aloud, and picture books made me think of the age that I was when I read picture books and I wanted to write again, that I got the courage to try again. It was that good feeling inside that made me want to write.
I'm going to add something to that, because we can't control what other people say to us. So we can't stand here and say, no one will ever tell you that your writing's bad, because someone might. The trick is what you control. So you can control that you won't listen to that you won't let that make you stop doing something. And that pertains to if you go paint, or sing, or act, or it doesn't matter. If you're doing anything that's creative, that matters to you, don't listen to other people bringing you down. Way in the back in the green shirt. I'll repeat your question.
You stand up, sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
She wants to know if the center of everything relates to something in your life.
Yeah. Well, I told you a little bit about that feeling with my dad and wanting to see what I could do for it if I could fix it. That's definitely true. And I love the parades. I have a son. My son's name is Jack. He's 9. Jack is very interested in physics. He's very interested in time travel. And while I was not going to write a fantasy with time travel in it, I was interested in exploring that possibility that you could go back in time, and whether or not there were ways that the universe was constructed that would let you do that. So talking with my son Jack also informed my stories.
Okay, we want to go back way in the back. In the front, yellow t-shirt. Yes.
I have one for Linda.
Yes, ma'am.
Or both of you, actually.
Both of us.
Do you get frustrated when you're writing books?
You get frustrated when you're writing books.
Oh, yes. Yes, go ahead. Tell it. Go.
Yeah, it's very much related to the last thing that I just said about don't let other people bring you down. Don't let yourself bring you down either. There are times when it's tricky. The writer's block that I said doesn't exist. You can make it go away by taking a walk, playing with your dog. Doing something that's not writing is the best way for me to overcome my frustration, because usually the frustration comes from having trouble figuring out how to solve a problem. And if I break from it, then you probably have experiences with having to solve a problem. You think about it, you can't figure it out, you forget about it, you go for a walk, you figure it out. It's the same with writing problems, right?
Yeah, like the best idea is if you are ever working on your homework and you don't know what's next and you're really mad, take a shower. All the ideas come in the shower when you can't write them down.
Linda, there's another microphone over there.
But does it work? Let's find out, people. How many think it'll work?
Okay, now we're in this section. We gotta hit every section, okay? Over here. Right here in the green hoodie.
speak. Oh, you stole it. No, they both work. They both work. Did I go to the Army? Is that what you're asking me? I did. I went to Fort Benning, and I also spent time with a lot of soldiers, and including the ones that are in the book, especially the ones that are in the book. Yes? What's the title of the new book that you're writing?
The new book that I'm writing is currently called Milo in Obergon. It's like Oregon, but with ogres in it. And it's a fantasy. I'm actually writing it for my son, Jack, who says I always write about girls. He said he wanted a book with a boy main character that had humor, action, and history. He said, I want a book with ham.
Ham?
Ham, humor, action, and mystery.
Oh,
Ham.
like
So that's
ham.
what I'm working on now. My publisher doesn't like the title though, so it might change. We'll see.
Okay. Now we're here. Pink stripe. Where did I get the? Oh, cool. Yeah, courage. Look, don't you love this? I heard about smoke jumpers, the first black smoke jumpers. And it was just an intriguing story that I heard a little snippet about a really long time ago, that there were forest fires in the American West during World War II, and that there were these men who were trained to be the first black smoke jumpers. And I just looked into it and found that there was a lot more to the story than that little piece that I heard. And so that just sort of got me digging and interested. I'm just... Yeah. Do you put people that you...
Do I put people that I know in my fiction? Yes, and you can identify them if it's a nice person. But if they're a mean person, I change lots of things. Because people cannot find themselves in my book.
Don't anger the writer.
But in truth, every character that I write has a little bit of me in it, and also probably a little bit of somebody that I know. And sometimes I give my characters provisional names. I give them a name just for the draft that's a real name of someone I know to help me keep the characteristics straight, and then I change it later so that that person isn't identifiable.
Wait a minute. You have said yes to father.
I'll tell you a little bit, but I'm also going to honor my father because I think it was a scary thing with him. And it's his story, not mine, so I don't tell the content. But this is what happened that day. So I was saying, no. And my grandmother was actually there at the house. And she came in and she sat next to me and she said, Lou, that's my dad's name, she said, Lou, go ahead, tell me. And he told her his great fear. And she listened. So I regret that I wasn't the one, but I kind of know what he would have said. But thank you for asking.
How old were we when we started writing? I started writing when I was probably 6 or 7. Terrible, terrible stories that I loved so much. And I was really, really lucky that no one told me to stop.
Tanya, do you remember one of those stories? Can you tell us anything about a real story?
I can tell you that there were an entire series of stories about Henry the Happy House.
A lot of action.
A lot of action with a static building, yes.
When I was 6, I wrote a poem. Would you like to hear it? Yeah. It's like this. There once was a ghost who burnt some toast, and it always came back to haunt him. And then one night when the moon was bright, he tried to make some waffles.
How hard is it to get a book published? Take it away.
I'll tell you what, it can be really hard.
that was never the goal. So if you think about publishing a book, that's sort of like thinking about selling a product, right? Like, do you bake brownies to sell them? Sometimes maybe for a bake sale. But probably mostly you bake brownies because you like to bake brownies and eat them. Less so.
Yeah.
Two more questions.
You pick one and I'll pick one. Well, you've written fiction. Go ahead, setting.
It's sort of like thinking about. I think visually when I do that. And that's not something that I ever did naturally. I kind of learned how to do that for myself. I start to think visually about a scene. So it's not just what is happening, it's also who is doing something and where are they and why are they there. Are they at the beach? Why? Are they at the beach because they live there, or are they at the beach because they traveled there? If they traveled there, what are they doing that day at the beach? So all of those sort of imaginings, and you can go in any direction with that. If I'm writing fiction, I can go anywhere I want. Right? If I'm writing nonfiction, then I go to the real setting, but I also allow myself to see as many of the details as I can to give you a fleshed out setting that I possibly can.
Yeah, I would say for me, for setting, that's everything that Tanya said is right. It's also true for me. You have to have a setting that's logical. I'm not going to write a contemporary school story in outer space, unless I'm going to write a fantasy contemporary school story in outer space. But also, when I have a setting, I try to make sure that the setting itself might present some obstacles for the character. So if it's a school setting, maybe it's also really hot, and my character who has to do something she's already nervous about, that would make her sweat, right? And that would make it worse. So I try to come up with logical settings, but that also create complications.
And then when you
Zoe, one more
Yeah,
question.
one more. One, sir in the back in the black, you right there. Yeah. Oh, your favorite book as a child. I had so many. Can I name a couple real quick? I love the Little House books. I loved all the Ramona books. I loved everything Judy Blume ever wrote. But I'm going to mention now a picture book that I really adore. It was called Andrew Henry's Meadow. Has anyone read it? Yay! I love it. So Andrew Henry, now if you read it now, you'll find that the gender roles are pretty stereotypical. All the girls in his family want to do is their hair and sew clothes, whatever. I can put that aside. Andrew Henry loved to build things. He had two older sisters who were annoyed by him, two younger brothers who were annoyed by him. He built stuff that filled up the kitchen, and his family was just so irritated that one day Andrew Henry packed up his tools and he left. And he went out to a meadow far from his house and he built himself his own house. It was perfect just for him. And there he was, and Tanya, out in the woods, comes a little girl, Alice Burdick. And she's got bird cages and binoculars. She loves bird watching, but her dad is a farmer who thinks birds are pests. And Andrew Henry builds her a tree house that is perfect for how special she is. And what do you know? So out come like 8 kids, right? With all the things that their family doesn't see are special to them. And he builds a house for each kid that reflects exactly who they are. And I read that book, man, a million times, trying to guess what kind of house Andrew Henry would build that was special enough for me. I love that book. I highly recommend it. Tanya.
Beverly Cleary, yes. Judy Blume, yes. I have, I think, 4 books that if I had to pick only 4 to keep with me as childhood mementos, they would be 2 picture books and 2 middle grade novels. The 2 picture books are Where the Wild Things Are and Harold and the Purple Crayon. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. The 2 middle grade novels are The Phantom Toll Booth about why that book was your favorite, it occurred to me for the first time ever that the reason those 4 books had such a huge impact on me as a kid is because each of those characters created the world they wanted to have. Think about that. Harold and the Purple Crayon, Harold just drew what he wanted and made it so, right? Max sailed off to where the wild things were and saw what he wanted to see. Same with the other 2 books. And I was lucky enough to grow up with a pretty progressive dad who was a professor, and there were grad students around my house all the time. And things happened in my family like when your guidance counselor wants you to write down where do you see yourself in 5 years, my dad sent a note to say, my kid doesn't have to fill that out, that's a dumb question. and my dad ties into those 4 books. You know, right foot, left foot. Make the life you want to make for yourself. Create it, see what happens. And that's why those are my 4 favorite books, and that's what we're doing.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, well, perfect way to end. Thank you both very much.